Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Gabriele Chierchia. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Developmental Cognitive Neuroscience Lab at UCL London. And yeah, I'm happy to be here on the BeOnline symposium. And today I want to tell you a little bit about testing cognitive abilities in adolescence. So, in our group, we are interested in social, cognitive, and affective development. So we might be, for example, interested in whether perspective taking abilities change with age during adolescence, whether teenagers are more sensitive to social exclusion, to peer influence, and whether adolescence is an age of vulnerability for mental health. So whichever of these we are studying, typically we'll be comparing subjects from different age groups, such as adolescents and adults. And one of the challenges of this is that these different populations, they vary on various important dimensions. So, for instance, here we can see how different cognitive abilities, such as nonverbal reasoning, how steeply they develop. Their performance here increases steeply during adolescence until roughly the age of 20, and then gradually decreases after that. So, whichever process we are investigating, social influence or social exclusion, we want to make sure that any age differences that we observe are not just a byproduct of these changes, these important changes that are happening in the background. So that's why it's important for us to control for nonverbal reasoning. And there's a number of measures out there that are very well validated, such as the Raven's progressive matrices. But these are often protected, well, they're not free to use, and they're protected by copyright, and this prevents them from being adapted into computerized tasks. This is especially a problem for online studies, neuroimaging studies, longitudinal studies, and given that these tasks are traditionally done in pen and paper, they preclude the possibility to study response times. So fortunately, before I got to the lab, the group had developed a novel set of nonverbal reasoning items that they were actually using to address a different question. But I thought that it would be potentially very useful for these items to be made available to everyone. So this is how the items work. So they're in a matrix form. That's why this is called the Matrix Reasoning Item Bank, or MARZIB. And what you have to do is you have to look at this puzzle right here, and then you have to pick which of these will complete the puzzle. And there are various dimensions that can change within a puzzle: color, shape, the position of these items. Here there's only one dimension changing, just color, so this is a very easy item. You can use this as a catch trial to make sure that people are paying attention. This is a more complicated one where various dimensions are changing at the same time. And well, if you think about it a bit, well, you can see that we have line, 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 SSS, CC, and this is probably going to be a C. Also, the positions are always changing, and the colors are always changing, so we're probably looking for a green C in the bottom right here. And how we implement this is that we have 80 items. People have 30 seconds to respond to each. After 25 seconds, we give them a warning that only 5 seconds are missing. And after 8 minutes of doing this, the task ends regardless of how many items people completed. And each of these items is available in three different shape sets. So we have 80 times 3, we have 240 novel items, and this can be especially useful for longitudinal studies. So if you want to check whether performance changes between time 1 and time 2, you might not want to use exactly the same puzzles, but you want them to be equally difficult, and that's what you can do here, for instance, by choosing these guys and these guys, which are superficially dissimilar, but they actually have equal difficulty. So before making these available, I look at their preliminary psychometric properties. I wasn't expecting too much here because, as I said, this task was trying to address a different question, so it wasn't optimized for psychometric validation. However, some psychometric properties were adequate. We have adequate internal consistency, a split half reliability, test-retest reliability, also the shapes, the things that we did not want to affect performance, the shapes, not affect performance, while the aspects that we did want to affect performance did, such as increasing changes in dimensions, induced more errors and longer response times. And then we also compared this in a follow-up study. We compared this with a better validated online task, the International Cognitive Ability Resource, and we also find some evidence for both convergent and divergent validity. Of course, we were mainly interested in whether this task is sensitive to picking up on age differences, and we can either break up people into different age groups or probably better look at age continuously. And you can see here that we find a similar curve to the one I showed you earlier. So accuracy increases during adolescence roughly until the age of 20, and then tapers off. We also have the response time data here, so we can also see that while age increases accuracy, it also slightly increases response times. And then we can put those two measures together and get a measure of reasoning efficiency or inverse efficiency. So in this case, lower numbers are better because you're either getting more things right, more items right, or you're taking less to get them right, or both. So that's why looking at response times and having this task in a computerized version can maybe give us some important insights into the development of these reasoning processes, because if we just looked at accuracy, we find a peak at around between late adolescence and adulthood, while if we incorporate response times into the equation, then we see that this peak shifts earlier, roughly between mid and late adolescence. So, all of these tasks are available and ready to go. You can clone them in Gorilla and reuse them. They're in Gorilla open material. We also have all of the items with their item level statistics and age level statistics in the open science framework, so you can just pick and choose the items you want and create your own task with a custom duration and custom difficulty. And finally, I just wanted to say that all of this would have been much harder if we had just used our traditional testing, and I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the challenges of adolescent research. And these are mostly about recruitment and testing. So in terms of recruitment, well, we can't recruit online through Prolific or MTurk because adolescents have no access to that for good reasons. So we typically go through schools. That means you have to convince a busy head teacher to take his time to, or her time to contact students and parents. And typically how we do this is that we send a Gorilla questionnaire, and we have also obtained permission to have parental consent given electronically. So once we have the list of parents that have consented, we go back to the teachers, and then we can arrange the how and the when. So obviously, once you've done all this, you really want to try and be efficient in testing, and possibly to test as many people as possible. Though, at least until not long ago, well, it wasn't maximum efficiency. If you see the common denominator in these pictures, it's these monolithic luggages, each containing roughly, I think, 6 laptops. So we had most of our tasks implemented in MATLAB. Schools don't have MATLAB, so we just brought our own laptops, and we had to carry them around to each of these schools in London and sometimes outside of London. And even once you get all of this going, you get a handful of students going at the same time. You have to prepare each of their laptops beforehand, set them off, give them, their participant ID. And once all that's done, you have to go back to each of the computers, download your data onto a hard disk, and then bring that data onto the main computer back at the office. Now, of course, now the situation has changed. We can finally use the computer rooms that are already in those schools. So we can go to the schools hand-free, tap into existing resources, minimize disruption because we don't have to create these smaller groups, and we get an easier start. Because instead of preparing each of the laptops separately, we can just write a link on the Blackboard and ask students to plug them into their browsers. And at the end, all the data is stored online for us. And once you explain this to teachers, they understand that it's relatively easy. And this also increases the likelihood that they'll accept that you go a collaboration with them and that you can go test in their schools. And now during distancing time, the possibility to do this seems even more important, and we are hoping that we'll be able to have teachers conduct these sessions for us, and we'll maybe zoom in and monitor from remote. Just one last thing I wanted to mention is that another advantage of doing these large group experiments, I think, is that it increases the plausibility of social experiments. In this task, for instance, we asked adolescents to rate how risky they thought certain situations were, such as crossing a street on a red light, and we were interested in whether they would change their ratings after learning about the ratings of their peers. And clearly, it increases the plausibility of these peer ratings if their peers are actually with them being tested at the same time in the same room. Okay, so with that, I'd just like to thank all of the people who made the SmartZip project possible, Professor Sarah Jane Blakemore, Dr. Delia Fuhrman, and Blanca Piera Pisunier. And thanks to all of you for listening.